Taoiseach, it has been reported that your government and the independent ministers in the government in particular have sought and have received formal advice as to whether they are entitled to support in this House a bill that they have been advised is repugnant to the Constitution. Now, the Attorney General has not changed, so I presume neither has the advice received by government from the time my own party was in government and the same question arose. So can I ask you, therefore, in relation to the Water Services Bill currently before the House, can I ask you, has the government been advised as to whether the members of the government, in the same way, can support legislation the sole purpose of which is to defeat what has now been clarified as an obligation of European law? Isn't it clear from the reply of Environment Commissioner Vella to MEP Marian Harkin's parliamentary question that the derogation exempting us from water charges was ended by Fianna Fáil and the Greens in government? Isn't it clear that they, at that time, ended our exemption when they failed to apply for an opt-out in the management plans due in December of 2009 and instead introduced the concept of water charges in 2010? If you accept that, do you not also accept that we are bound by the EU law obligation? And do you accept that such an obligation under the decisions of our courts takes primacy over both our domestic law and indeed our constitution? Taoiseach, I don't believe that the Oireachtas has ever been knowingly asked by government to legislate in a way that is directly contrary to European law. So can I ask you, have you been legally advised, since the views have been expressed by the Commission, that Irish government ministers are entitled to vote to support the bill?
The position of the government in relation to the Water Framework Directive has been well articulated, Deputy. And the current situation is that the establishment of an expert commission to assess and make recommendations on the funding of domestic public water services in Ireland and the 9-month suspension of domestic water charges was in fact discussed at Cabinet, and I'm sure the Minister will be addressing the details of that commission later. The Minister for the Environment will then meet with the EU Commissioner in early June to outline the current policy developments in Ireland in this area. And I would repeat that the Government is committed, fully committed, to securing a sustainable long-term funding model for domestic water services that is consistent with its international environmental obligations. The suspension period, as has been said on quite a number of occasions, hopefully will allow for a measured deliberative process on the future funding of domestic water services and the future of domestic water charges. And that is the government position.
Ask what the government position was. There are very clear views, understood, very passionately held and honourably held by members of this House on this matter. I'm asking you as a matter of law whether it is the formal advice you've received that the government is entitled to proceed with legislation that you've now been advised is contrary to European law. It's a simple matter. To avoid the situation where our country is exposed to legal action from the Commission, I think members, certainly in my own party, we need to have clarity in relation to where we stand on this matter. If we are to have an exposure, at least give us clear advice in relation to these issues.
Deputy Howland, Taoiseach, 1 minute to conclude.
Well, obviously the government are proceeding with legislation, Deputy, and the government operates within the constitutional advice which it receives.
Deputy Paul Murphy.